Welcome back to Unveiling the Covenants, exploring the mysteries of the Father's love in the pages of sacred scripture. We've been talking about the story of Joseph at this point in salvation history as a series, and just to recap, salvation history is literally the story of God working out our salvation in the life of humanity, in the history of human relations, and particularly in the life of Israel, and then eventually to the ends of the earth. We are looking at a patriarch named Joseph, who is the son of Jacob, whose name has been changed to Israel. And when we last left off, Joseph had just been sold by his 11 brothers, well, really the 10 older brothers, into slavery to the Ishmaelites, who will then sell him to Egypt. And the Egyptians will buy him and sell him off to Potiphar, who is one of the king's officials, and he will become a slave in Potiphar's household. Before we get there, though, I want to look at chapter 37 once again, and particularly toward the end of it, when Reuben's the firstborn of Jacob, and he's trying to curry his father's favor. He doesn't want Joseph to die. And so he goes and sees that Joseph wasn't in the pit, and he said to his brothers, "The lad is gone, and where shall I go?" So they took Joseph's robe, that great robe that his father had given him, killed a goat, dipped the robe in blood, and then they sent the long robe with sleeves and brought it to their father. They also rend the robes. "This we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not." He recognized it, and he says, "It is my son's robe. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." And Jacob, his father Israel, Jacob, tore his own garments, put sackcloth upon his loins, mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, saying, "I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Now, there's a lot at play. Remember, I mentioned when you think of Joseph, think of Christ, think of the Joseph of the New Testament, but you can also see certain parallels here. There's almost a reversed irony at play. Remember how Jacob tricked his father Isaac? Well, he slaughters goats, and he cooks those goats. And he also tricks his father by means of the skin of the goats and by means of donning the robe of his own brother. And now, Jacob's sons have taken the robe of their brother, who is Jacob's son, and they have torn it, slaughtered a goat, taken the blood of the goat on the robe, and they've deceived their father now in his old age. There's this kind of ironic reversal, if you will, that what Jacob did in his adulthood, in his early adulthood, is now being done to him by his sons in their early adulthood. Look at the language here, though. "I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Now, this language of the father going down to Sheol being this place of the dead. In theology, we think of Sheol as not just the hell of the damned, but also the place where even the righteous go down, as if in a kind of waiting, because at this point, the reality of the beatific vision in heaven with God had not been revealed to them just yet. And so, the father watching his son, his seemingly righteous son, his beloved son, go down to Hades. Eventually, though, the descent into Hades of Joseph, the Sheol, as Joseph is undergoing, will become the source of the salvation of all of Israel. Just as much as Christ descending into hell, the limbo of the fathers, becomes the source of the final act of the salvific work of Christ in drawing the new Israel, all of the children of the covenant, into heaven with God for those who die in God's friendship. That's the biblical parallel at play here, because while Joseph himself has not actually gone into literal Sheol, he's been sold into slavery. His human dignity has been lost for a while, so to speak. He has descended into the abyss of slavery, and he will actually be incarcerated. So he will go deeper into the abyss of the worldly representation of Sheol, so to speak. Remember, Egypt is also a hub of cultish worship of pagan idols, and so it's a kind of hell that Joseph is going to undergo. Christ defeats those pagan idols in the same way that the God of Israel, Yahweh, the God of the universe, defeats the providential, quote-unquote, powers of the pagan gods of Israel, of Egypt. And so what Joseph does mirrors what Christ is going to do in the future by means of his death and resurrection. But I wanted to point this out because this is crucial. So the Midianites, the Ishmaelites, had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. And so I want to jump forward to chapter 39, because chapter 38 has a bit of a story. I'll narrate this to you very briefly because it's an odd story. I don't want to spend too much time on it. In a future series, we'll go chapter by chapter through the Bible, and then we can talk about these particular narratives in some length and depth. But briefly put, Judah is one of the sons of Jacob. He's the fourth born son of Jacob. And Judah is the one through whom Jesus will eventually be descended. That's a story for a later time. Judah has a daughter-in-law named Tamar, and Judah's son has died. Judah has an obligation to then have his younger sons marry her that she may have children, because back then the preservation and the well-being of a woman who is married actually depended upon the sons caring for her because of the right of property. And it's also because the work that was done at that point involved a tremendous amount of physical labor. And so her legal care was dependent upon her husband and upon the sons in her care. She was left with no children. Her name is Tamar. And so Judah had that legal obligation. He sends one of his sons to her, but he refuses to bear children with her, and so he dies. Because legally, if those younger sons have Tamar as wife, and they have children with her, the children she bears will be legally considered the children of the older brother, the children of the one who passed. And so they don't want that to happen for one reason or another. It has to do with the delineation of property, the care of the child, even though they won't have their name continued, it'll be the name of the older brother. It's an act of charity of sorts. And so the older son doesn't want to do this, and the younger son was not of age. And when he did come of age, Judah did not have that younger son marry Tamar. And so Tamar is now left widowed and without children. She is, in a sense, without a standing in society. And so what she does is she dresses as a Canaanite prostitute, a ritual prostitute, which was an evil thing that some Canaanite women did. It was temple prostitution, and it was a heinous thing. God forbade it. Judah goes and sins with this person he thinks is a temple prostitute. And so he impregnates her, and he leaves with her the marks of his status, his signet ring and his staff. And in the end, she is discovered to be pregnant. Tamar is discovered to be pregnant, and the people want to stone her to death because the perception is that she has slept outside of wedlock, until she produces Judah's signet and Judah's staff, the symbols of his stature, essentially saying, I am under the protection of the head of this tribe, the head of his household, Judah. And Judah realizes that while her work was duplicitous, what she did was a lie, she was more legally in the right than Judah was, because Judah owed her providential protection, and he wasn't granting it of her. Now, I don't want to unpack more than that. That's a story for another time. It's a bizarre story, to say the least. I want to go forward here. Oh, by the way, Tamar will then bear twins. Their names will be Perez and Zerah. And so Perez will eventually be the forefather of Jesus. But going back to the story of Joseph now. So Joseph, this great king of dreams, he is taken down to Egypt. He serves in the household of Potiphar. The Ishmaelites brought him there. The Lord was with Joseph, it says. He became a successful man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him. And the Lord caused all he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. Wherever Joseph went, Potiphar was blessed. And so Potiphar realized this. There was a problem, though. He put Joseph in charge of the household. There was a problem, though. Joseph was handsome, good-looking, responsible, intelligent. Remember, all those gifts that he had learned in dwelling in tents with his father Jacob. His father, who knew all these things, taught them to Joseph. Well, now Potiphar's wife casts her eyes upon Joseph. Now, the fidelity of marriage is a reality, a kind of covenantal reality, even amongst those who didn't profess faith in the God of Israel. Nonetheless, in pagan cultures, it was kind of unspoken that extramarital affairs tended to happen, especially amongst high-ranking nobility. This wasn't therefore ubiquitous, nor was it permitted, and if one was caught, well, they were essentially put to death by means of cultural norms. Still, pagan cultures had looser sexual expectations than the Israelites did in terms of the covenant law they had with God. This doesn't excuse Potiphar's wife, though. So she casts eyes upon Joseph, insists that he lie with her. He refused, saying, "My master has no concern about anything in the house because he put me in charge of everything. He is not greater in this house than I, and there's nothing greater in this house than I am except the master. He hasn't kept me back anything. How could I sin against him and sin against God? This is a great wickedness." So what does she do? Well, one day, he went into the house to do his work. He left and she caught him, and he runs away, but he leaves his garment in her hand. He fled and got out of the house. Now she realizes at this point that the jig is up and that people are going to realize that something happened. Rather than accept her role in this, she blames Joseph. She says that he came on to her and attempted to rape her. She laid up his garment by her until his master came home, and then she said, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought among us came in to insult me. As soon as I lifted my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled the house." And so what does Potiphar do? He has Joseph thrown in prison. Mind you, as I mentioned earlier, this was a minor penalty to be paid for this crime. This is captain of the guard. The law at that point would have essentially called for Joseph to be put to death. Potiphar held him in some regard. God had his hand on Joseph. Even more so, more importantly, what's happening here is God is using even this event to elevate Joseph even higher. He won't see it at this point. And so the Lord was with Joseph, showed him mercy, and in prison, he became keeper of the prison. He became a kind of administrator of the prison because God was with him, because he was trustworthy. And so in his care were all the prisoners. Whatever was done there, he was the doer of it. And the keeper of the prison paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Now, this is a painful story. The story of Joseph is a tremendously painful story. There was a time when I was going through a really personal thing, a very heartbreaking situation. And the story of Joseph kept being brought to my mind. And to this day, I can't think of the story of Joseph without remembering that phase of life. I was about 20 years old at this time. The plight of Joseph, the struggle he undergoes in prison, while I didn't undergo imprisonment of that sort, I'm no stranger to it. I'm no stranger to the burden and pain of the cost that needs to be paid for the sake of following Jesus Christ. And the loss and heartbreak that we can endure, sometimes without real understanding at the time of it, of why that's happening. And it shattered me. The event shattered me. But it became an avenue of me clinging to Jesus more than ever before. And so that's what I did. And trusting him and moving forward one step at a time meant that in the end, the Lord God flourished me in such a way that heartbreak actually paved the way for the work that I get to do today, the influence that I get to have in terms of the propagation of the gospel today. I don't deserve any of this. I worked hard to know these truths that I may teach them. But that hard work was primarily driven by the divine initiative of God's own grace. The Lord our God gifted me with the grace that I didn't deserve and had his hand on me simply because I'd given my life to him. I say this as an exhortation to all of you, as one who recognizes the pain that even potential death can bring. And I'm not joking as I say that. I want you to know that there's no cost that you and I can pay for the sake of Christ, for which the blessing of Christ will not infinitely surpass, disproportionately surpass. God has his hand on his children. He wants to flourish us. He wants to bless us with lives beyond our understanding, if we but heed to him, if we but give our lives to him. And so there is a conversation to be had within our souls and with God about surrender, trusting that he won't take away anything good. And if things are taken away from us but for a time, it is because he wants to flourish us in a far greater way than you and I can possibly imagine. Be faithful. Go forth in faith and trust him to make us fruitful. which is what happens to Joseph everywhere he goes. Wherever he goes, God makes him tremendously fruitful. And that's exactly what happens here. And so Joseph rises the ranks in the prison. And by the time we come to chapter 40, we've got two people being put in prison, the butler of the king and the baker of the king. And the Pharaoh of Egypt, the king of Egypt, was offended by the both of them. And so they spend this time in prison, and one day they have this story of two dreams. And those two dreams will eventually spell the release of Joseph, but not for a time. And there's imagery at play here. There's imagery within the dreams. We won't talk about that. Talk about this in this episode. What I do want to point out, however, is that even in the midst of, as I mentioned earlier, Joseph is taken from the flourishing hand of his father, in the land of his father, to Sheol, Egypt, this place of vice, this den of sin, this horrible avenue of iniquity and pagan idolatry. And so it's a kind of Sheol for those of us who serve the Lord. It is easy to think that amidst a sinful nation, it is impossible to serve God. And yet, Joseph's story shows us that having faithfulness to God means in good times and in bad, God is going to be faithful to us if we but say yes to him. And so God helps him rise the ranks in the household of Potiphar, which is again allegorical. Because the household of Potiphar can be any of our places of work, even if those places at that time don't seem to be directly glorifying the Lord. Because make no mistake about it, that the work of our economics, the work of our labor, the work of our jobs are all areas that the Lord wants us to work as unto the Lord for his glory, for his honor. And as we do so, he blesses with success the work of our hands, not because he wants to remove us from greater faithfulness in the faith, but because he wants those impacts of the faith, those of us who are bearers of the covenant God and his call, those of us who see that we are bearers of the divine image, he wants us to become bearers of that light in a very cognizant way in the workplace, in the marketplace, that those who see us can know that there's something different about the way we live. So firefighters, office workers, medical workers, the Catholic, the biblical Christian who holds those truths in their heart bears a different moral marker than those who don't. And the conduct of these individuals, both in terms of recognizing the dignity of the human person and responding to that, but also having ethics, a proper, elevated, virtuous ethos in our conduct of work that shows itself in a tremendously robust manner in the way we work. Because what we do is not accidental. What we do is incidental to the work that we do. What we do in our faith is permeated into our labor, our work relationships, and therefore the ancillary relationships that we have. And that's what Joseph begins to see. But I also want to greatly encourage all of us who are listening that the story of Jacob right now, the story of Joseph right now, is indicative of the fact that bad things will befall us, sometimes injustices that we don't deserve. It is difficult when we undergo these injustices. And yet what I want to illustrate to you is that we can turn to God, we can trust him to be the Lord of justice for us. We can tell him to elevate us over those who will us harm. Because that's what he does. That's what he did. And so Joseph continues in faithfulness, even when he is unjustly treated. Everyone listening right now knows what it's like to be treated unjustly. But I also want to take this deeper. There are those out there who will treat you unjustly under the guise of self-righteousness. Those people we can trust to the judgment seat of God. That even if we don't see justice in this life, we will see justice in the next. Because God is not blind to our suffering. He is not turning a deaf ear to our prayers. He is not turning his face from our turmoil. God looks upon you. And so the question you and I need to ask ourselves is not, have I been unjustly treated? I think the answer to that is yes. It's whether our hearts are right before the Lord. whether we are seeking to glorify ourselves or Him. And if we're seeking to glorify Him, that we can faithfully labor, knowing that He knows how to flourish and fulfill us in this life and the next. Because the Lord wants fruitfulness in our life. And so in the darkness of the Sheol that we're going through, the Hades, the hell that we're going through, rightly speaking, the language here is hell. In the darkness of the hell that we're going through, a hell sometimes of our own making, sometimes imposed upon us, know that Christ Himself has descended into the abyss of hell and proclaimed the gospel of His salvation. And He descends into the hell of our own life right now, proclaiming the hope of His own gospel. And He is going to draw us out of it in this life and the next. God doesn't delight in our suffering. But notice this. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. You will notice that as you keep holding your face high before the Lord, He is going to bless you. He's going to show you favor. And you can actually ask Him to do that. Tell Him, show me your favor. Elevate me. Lift me out of this hell. Establish me. Prepare a banquet for me in the sight of those who have set themselves against me. Let my cup overflow. Be thou the Father of my blessings. Let your favor sustain me. Let your food, your drink, nourish me. So that even amidst this suffering, people will look at me and see that his Lord has not failed him. Her Lord has not failed her. That's the call here. As you read chapter 39 of the book of Genesis, what you are seeing is that the prisoners in the prison are cared for by the one who fears the Lord. In the hell that you are going through, there are others who suffer with you, alongside you, or who know the suffering. The Lord wants to use you and I, with the wounds that we have, to touch those wounds and to elevate them from the place of suffering into the place of glory. To elevate them from the place of their turmoil into a life of grace. Glory is to be found in heaven, okay? I don't want to overplay that word. The glory of God is ultimately to be found in heaven. The glory of God is man made fully alive, and the life of man is the vision of God. And so it is our call right now, as Joseph did, to show people the face of God. And if you and I can set our face upon God and to be the face of God to others, and not just making an argument for, therefore, give people money and engage in charitable giving. No, there's a greater reality at play here. Live faithfully the work that we've been called to. And if the work isn't providing for us, ask the Lord our God to give us work that will flourish and provide for us. Trust that He will provide. And when we do so with boldness, knowing that our God is in control. And so look at the final verse that we want to look at here. This is in chapter 39, verse 23. The keeper of the prison paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. And that is my prayer for you. This is my prayer for all of us, because this is the will of the Lord, that we do prosper. This isn't a prosperity gospel, mind you. I'm not saying that therefore your bank accounts are going to overflow beyond reason or compare right now. But the prosperity that we will see in the Lord is that His favor will bring fruition to all of the works of our hands, so that we will flourish, we will grow, we will be strengthened, and that the gospel of Jesus Christ may bring salvation to the ends of the earth, but that we will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That's my prayer and hope for you. So that even amidst those who need the help of the Lord, we will be witnesses to the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Hope in God and keep praising Him. In the times of turmoil and in our prisons, in our hells, in the Sheol that we are going through, do not stop worshiping. Run to worship. Run to the sacraments. Run to prayer. Run to hope in the Lord our God, trusting that the authority that God is going to elevate you to, the position and stature that He is granting you, will be over the jurisdiction that He has elevated you to because you've been faithful in all things. He who is faithful in small will be faithful in bigger things, and he who is faithful in small will be given more. God wants to bless you. He calls faithfulness out of us. Let us be faithful beyond compare. Let those who see us know that the Lord blesses us because we have chosen to be faithful to Him. And so my final exhortation to you is this. You are suffering. I hear you. Know that all of us go through different facets of suffering. And I've gone through quite hellish circumstances before this in life. The Lord our God is faithful to you now, and He is going to be ever faithful to you in the future. The question is, are we fully given to the Lord our God? One thing suffering does allow us to do is to look at our own conscience before the Lord and say, Lord, this area of my life wasn't given to you, and now I want to do so. That's my challenge to you. Let the light of the Lord so illuminate the darkness of our hearts that, like Joseph, we can receive His favor and blessing because we have been stripped of everything: stature, dignity, wealth, honor. And we can look at the Lord and say, I am yours. Give your lives to the Lord this day. And may the Lord bless the work of your hands, highly favor you, and elevate you out of your hell, out of your Sheol, into the place of influence and honor and blessing in the propagation of the gospel that He wants you to have. May God bless you and keep you always. Until next time, I'm Marcus Peter.